Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Oilfield Strong. My name is Grant Swartzwelder and I'll be your host today. Typically on Oilfield Strong, as you know, we tend to have one main topic that we really go deep into, but today's going to be a little different. There's been so much activity in the last week or two with so many geopolitical, macro, micro factors affecting the oil industry that I thought it would be really helpful to have an individual very knowledgeable in all these topics to come and explain why they're so different and so important to us. You know, you talk about drill, baby, drill. You talk about Venezuela. You talk about Iran. You talk about strategic petroleum reserve. We could go on and on and on. And they all have a different effect on the oil field and for oil producers. So today I'm very lucky to have Kirk Edwards, who I love reading, and I urge you all to go pull him up on LinkedIn because about every, 3 weeks or so, he'll come in with a hot sports opinion, and it's full of facts. It's full of really thoughtful information. And it comes because he has a wealth of knowledge in the industry, from starting up Odessa Exploration, selling that to Key, which was a service company, becoming exec VP on the board there. Most recently with being president of his own company, Latigo Petroleum, but then a host of other things, from being chair of the Chamber of Commerce to Permian Basin Petroleum Association, chairman of the El Paso branch of the Dallas Federal Reserve. So he comes with just fantastic information that I plan on extracting from him through this event. But so we have all these topics, Kirk, but I really want to start off a little more higher level because I'm confused. Does the United States have an energy policy? And if so, will you help me understand what the heck it is? Because I look at all these factors and I am dense, but it sure seems very hard to figure out for me.
Well, I appreciate, Grant, first of all, you having me today. I look forward to talking with you and sharing stuff with your audience ahead. And what a great question to start out with. Do we have an energy policy in this country? And frankly, I think we're supposed to, but I don't know what that may be. We talk about the Trump administration, and when everybody's campaigning, they seem to act like there's going to be a some kind of energy policy out there. But once they get in office, everybody does something different. The Biden administration went straight after the oil and gas business, the Keystone Pipeline. You remember when they got in, and then the Trump administration talked about drill, baby, drill, and getting everybody back to work and becoming self-sufficient, but right off the bat, they asked Saudi and everybody to flood with the tariffs that got put in, hurt a lot of the products that we buy in the oil and gas business. So you would think we have a policy, but, to me, it's very undefined right now because us in the business don't know what it is. The strategic petroleum reserve that you talked about, it should be full now. And Grant, I don't know when you have seen a more volatile time in our existence as a country in our lifetimes. As far as being able to go to war with Russia or China or Iran or anybody in South America right now, Cuba. But the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is part of that national energy plan. And Biden administration drained it probably, 300 million barrels of oil. And again, the Trump administration promised during the campaign to fill it back up to the top.
Well, in theory, he drained it because prices were high and he wanted to soften that. Well, now prices are pretty low, which seems like a good time to fill it back up.
Yeah, exactly. And Biden drained it right before the midterm elections to drive the price of gasoline down, which he did. I mean, it's amazing how there is a cause and effect when this happens. But again, it sits pretty much where it was before. And, to me, this Venezuelan oil, the tankers we keep stealing or taking or whatever, we're commandeering them, they have 30 to 50 million barrels of oil coming out of Venezuela ahead. To me, that should go on our SPR. I mean, it's a heavy crude. We need that sour crude in the SPR. And I was told, or I read today, that maybe the sulfur content of it is too much for the SPR. So I may get off this topic. But
and explain that why you think that would be good, because, and I'll kind of, obviously you know this, but kind of the lighter crude of the Permian versus the heavier, that the blending of that is advantageous, right?
Yeah, so our refineries across the Gulf, across the country, are set up for a cocktail of 2/3 sweet oil, 1/3 what we call heavy oil, sour oil, And why you have to have the heavier oil, it makes sense when you think about it. But if you only had sweets, you only get light products like jet fuel and very high-end gasoline and things like that. But when you put the sour in, it makes another blend of regular gasoline. Diesel fuel comes out of it, but asphalt for paving the roads and things like that. So
Right.
the refineries need to make all these products to make as much money as possible. But that's why you need this 2/3, 1/3 cocktail. And again, the SPR was set up in case we got disruption of oil coming into our country. Well, we don't need any sweet oil anymore. We've got plenty of oil in this country. Matter of fact, we export it, but we still need, now, I don't know if a lot of people know this, we import probably 4.5 to 5 million barrels a day of sour oil, and mainly it's coming from Canada right now. So the biggest competitor of this Venezuelan barrel is going to be the Canadian oil. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of that gets pushed out in the future.
So let's go back to that, the question about energy policy, because I say I don't know, and you can correct me, but in a way, I think the energy policy, and I've heard it from Chris Wright, I've heard it from others in the administration, is that the energy policy is to have $50 crude price.
Yeah. And I think that's
if you had to pick one thing that is like
this.
the policy, that seems to be what the policy is to have $50. Am I right or wrong? What do you think of that?
No, again, it's the Trump policy, and he keeps spouting it more and more. And so it takes us a while. Some of us are not that smart in this business, but when he said he wants $50 oil and sub $2 gasoline, and now we're getting at 55 and 56 today, he may be getting what he wants. And again, to have Saudi flood the market, that drives the price down. It has every time. You and I have been in this business since the 80s. And there's something really to it.
Because that's been a series of additional production that the Saudi, it's been 100,000 here, 100,000 there.
Right. And again, they have put an additional 2 million barrels on the market over the last, 6 months or so. And when Trump asked them to start doing this, none of us thought that the Saudis would say, sure, you bet, we'll do it. I mean, there's something for it with them. And I've always had a theory, Grant, that the Saudis are very smart people. First of all, I want to put that on the record. But again, if you're a Saudi person and you're about to flood the market with oil, the first thing you do is go hedge your oil at $75 a barrel, and then you go announce it to the public that you're about to flood the market, and you're still going to get 75, and you put as much oil in the market as you want because you got it hedged. And again, I really do believe that they're that smart to have that done.
You mean there are
the
folks in this world and this government that would actually do kind of inside trading type things where they know information and then they would act on it? I'm saying that tongue in cheek because it seems like that's happening more and more. But
yeah, no, but you see the politicians when they enter office and they have their financial disclosures, and 6 to 8 years later they're $10 to $20 million millionaires, and I don't think they do that just from their side work at the Congress.
I think you're right. So if it sounds like you agree that $50 is kind of their target or somewhere in the 50s, play that out since your extensive experience there in Midland, Odessa, as an oil company, working with the service company. What's that going to do to the industry? What do we have to look forward to this year? And I think you had an example with Harold Hamm also. Yeah.
So again, you made a good point with Harold Hamm today. He announced, he's one of the biggest drillers in the Bakken up in North and South Dakota. And he announced he's going to quit today. He said at $55 oil, I can't make any money. That's their break even. He said he doesn't need to practice, so he's going to park his rigs. And again, he was the guy at the White House last Friday with everybody else on talking to Trump about what is good and what is bad about the business in Venezuela. And when Harold Hamm says that, that means something. And I might make that post today on LinkedIn, Grant, because I think that is news for everybody.
I think that's
when
huge.
Somebody like that
Harold Hamm is probably one of the leaders of the industry from a PR or from an industry standpoint.
Yeah, he's like a Boone Pickens to me. He's definitely a bellwether, and he's not afraid because he's an independent to say what's on his mind, and he always has. And I think he's one of the leaders in our industry out there today. But back to your question, we've lost 70 rigs drilling for oil in the United States, and most of those are here in the Permian. since March of this last year. And 70 rigs and 100 people, that's 7,000 people that have lost their jobs. To me, I've been shocked at how the oil level, the production in the Permian has been sustained and even gained. But I think we're finally at that plateau. I really do. I think in the coming months, we're going to see that we have plateaued on our production here in the Permian, and it's going to start coming down now. And the resiliency of our operators, the Diamondbacks and the Devons and the Apaches and everybody, the Chevrons and Exxons that are out here, the brilliance of their technology and the people that are drilling these wells are drilling out 15,000 foot laterals now, as opposed to 6,000 feet lateral when this thing started. They're drilling, what is that? That's going to be a 3 times the well just in one well that we used to do 10 or 15 years ago. And so that's why we're still getting so much production with less rigs. But again, they don't need to practice either, like Harold Ham said. And so I think you're going to see more and more rigs coming off the market when they get out of these contracts ahead.
But talking about Diamondback, Conoco, they can survive things in a different way because a lot of times they're diversified. They use that crude elsewhere. They've got a better balance sheet. But what about those that are below them, the Bob's Oil Company, the Bob's Field Service Company? This could have a devastating effect on those.
No, yeah, and granted, already is. I mean, I've got so many friends and family members that are in the service side of this, and they call and tell me about it. I mean, if you're working for a Diamondback and you're one of their key suppliers, you're probably in pretty good shape. The people on the production side are in good shape because once that oil's coming on, you got to keep it going. So they seem to be okay. But if you're involved with the drill bit, the drilling rig, that service side of the business is not doing well. And again, it's incredibly critical for us to keep those people educated and working ahead. But because we don't need them to leave the business. As you know, once people leave this, they don't come back. And I think we're seeing a lot of that start up right now.
And with the lower price, I've also heard folks say, with the lower price, that allows bigger companies to gobble up the little companies. And you've already seen quite a bit of consolidation. But do you think that could be a side effect also, where there's just going to be continued consolidation of the producers out there because of the financial weakness of the smaller companies?
Yeah, and to me, it's it's just mergers. So you saw Devon yesterday, and I think it's Coterra that they were talking about merging together, which would be another multi-billion-dollar company. And I just think it's getting to be more of a manufacture process here in the Permian, where they know if they drill a well, what it's going to make, how much it's going to make. But they are Chevron and Exxon and everybody again has laid off 2,000 to 3,000 people. Conoco that you just mentioned with the Marathon acquisition and all that. So it's having its toll out here. But it's just, again, I wish the administration knew, what the cause and effect of a lower oil price does to the national security of this country.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Well, let's talk national security because that's how it's couched for Venezuela and kind of taking it over, or however you define that, and you have that oil. But then I think you've also made comments about comparing Venezuela to Iran and kind of the difference between those two situations and which one is more important or could have a bigger effect.
Yeah, and Grant, to your listeners to this, and again, I've tried to do some studying on it. They need to go study what's called the Monroe Doctrine, because when we went into Venezuela and we took that tanker the other day, that made no sense to me, how we can go take somebody's president out of a country and just go grab their tanker. But when you look at this Monroe Doctrine and you find out that, and again, I don't know if this is what's happening or not, but the protection of this hemisphere from the Chinese have invested, I think, $80 or $90 billion in Venezuela, yep. For that, because a lot of their oil that they ship out goes to China. And so to me, I think that's the effect. And the same thing with Greenland. Why would we be one in Greenland? Is again to protect this hemisphere. But the Iranian crisis right now, that is material. So back to Venezuela. I'm sorry, someone jump around on you. They make 800,000 barrels a day. That is nothing. I called it in our local newspaper a nothing burger, because that amount of oil it's not even a 1% on the world market today. It's heavy crude. It's hard to transport. It's hard to refine. And and again, having American companies go in there and try to prop that back up from 800,000 to 2 or 3 or 4 million barrels a day, the rate of return is not like it is in the Permian at all. You don't know when the Trump administration is out in another 3 years, a new president gets elected in the United States, that they don't nationalize who's down there then. And it's going to take 50 to $100 billion to redo Venezuela, and 8 to 10 years to get that oil in the market. And nobody wants that right now when you've got the surety of government protections and the pricing and everything we've got right now in the Permian, Eagle Ford, other areas of this country. But then you go to Iran, you mentioned them, that's a big deal. I mean, Iran makes probably 3 or 4 million barrels a day, exporting probably over 3 million barrels a day. That oil comes off the market, and then all of a sudden, this whole dynamic changes. You're going to see the price go from, the $58, $57 amount today. I think you easily go back above 75. But again, you got Russia and Ukraine. If they kiss and make up. I saw a podcast yesterday where Russia has 280 million barrels of oil on the water, just sitting in ships waiting to go somewhere. And if people get the sign that oil can come to them in India and Southeast Asia and some other places, then you're going to see a dramatic drop in the oil price. So we've just got so many factors working on this right now. It makes your head spin for sure.
I saw a cartoon one time with a couple of cartoon oilfield folks looking up and all these black swans flying across. And one had Putin and one had Ukraine and Venezuela and all these. And it's like, and the response was, I don't know which one's going to get me, but I know one will. And depending on which one gets you, you could have a huge effect. There has started to be some talk about the oil price drastic increase that could happen depending on what happens and what that shock could be if you go from 58 up to 70 all of a sudden. Or what happens if certain things happen and it drops down to 50 or down further south. So how do you manage your company based on that?
Well, luckily, again, I'm a small enough size that we can hedge. And that is something that not a lot of people get to do. So in January, end of December of 24, start of 25, oil and gas prices hit a beautiful high back then. And so we were able to hedge our oil and gas for the entire year. And we even hedged some for 26 ahead on the natural gas side because it was so good back then. So we use hedging tools, and a lot of companies don't do that, but we can certainly sleep at night. We're unhedged for oil right now, which is sad, but we're definitely hedged on natural gas. So again, my company is based in the Texas Panhandle. We're very gas driven, 80% natural gas. So we're comfortable this year with our natural gas price. And again, that is a silver lining right now. If you're not in the Permian, because the Permian is stranded.
I was about to say, are you actually making more than a negative number up there?
Yes. Oh yeah. It's again, we've got, we're close to Henry Hub, sometimes above Henry Hub.
Wow. Look at you go.
On prices, but because our gas goes to Chicago, it goes to the Northeast, and they have cold winters up there and they need the gas. It's been a great market, but the poor guys in the Permian, you're still seeing a lot of negative checks right now that they have to pay people to take their natural gas away.
So another issue is just pure operation. And it used to be, during the Biden administration, a lot of thought on the environmental side, whether it's methane, but now you're talking a lot about zombie wells. That's kind of, I should have trademarked that because that has become a very popular term. Don't know if everyone really understands what it is or if I do, but you talk about all the water being injected and all these wells kind of coming back, and it's kind of a license to operate. And it seems like we're just continuing, the industry in the Permian, continuing to inflict pain on the environment out there through the water and the zombie wells and the such.
Yeah, and again, Grant, the earthquakes are the big one too.
Right.
We're injecting water into deeper horizons in the Ellenberger Formation because it takes it so well. Well, nobody knew that tickling the Ellenberger Formation down at 10 and 12,000 feet would make it mad and cause the faults to slip and cause earthquakes. So the Railroad Commission, and you got to give them benefit for this one, they made people stop doing the deep injection in the middle of Odessa area. They're still doing it in other areas out in Orla and far West Texas. But the earthquakes have subsided around the cities, which has been great. Problem is, people are putting water in the shallow horizons, and the shallow horizons can take it for a while, but it's just like you're putting it in a sponge. And once that sponge gets filled up, and it has nowhere to go, it starts expanding and expanding, and eventually it's going to pop. And that's kind of the way the formations are right now in some of these areas. And it's just whack-a-mole. The companies are making a lot of money putting that water away, but nobody seems to care when it bursts through to other wells, because they'll just quit putting water in that well and go find somewhere else to put it. But we got to find something. We got to do, I call it a Manhattan type project, to figure out what to do with that water and, turn it into, desal it, put it on cotton, grow crops with it. But the main thing is these AI centers, the data centers coming into Midland, Odessa, and out in Pecos, and utilizing that cheap natural gas that we're talking about for power to run these data centers. But they have to have water too, to cool and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully, I'm thinking how smart we are in so many facets of this industry that problem can get solved in the next 3 to 5 years too.
Well, we're definitely smart enough to solve it, but do we have the political will to do that? Because you look at, my understanding is New Mexico has stopped allowing a lot of that injection well, so they're moving that water over to Texas. In Texas, you don't know how clean that water has to be put on cotton or into a river. And so until you get, it's like so many issues, immigration, healthcare, it's so complicated that I think a Manhattan Project is kind of a correct assessment, because you've got to solve several big projects almost at the same time so that you can get a solution.
Well, and the problem, Grant, it's economics. So it's still cheap for oil company to call up a water hauling company and say, take my water, and what's the price? And they'll charge you a price for it, and you just put it in your economics. So maybe it's $1 or $2 a barrel. If they got up to $4 or $5 a barrel, these companies would be coming up with a way to change that, but it just hasn't happened yet. And I think that's going to be critical, because again, the commission is doing what they can, to put out the fires as they're coming down the road, but we still don't have an answer for what's going on. And again, the zombie wells you talked about, what happens there is, again, you're pressuring up that sponge that we talked about. Yep. And you may have an old plugged well in the middle of that sponge, and it has old cement in it, it had rotten pipe in it, and it's just pressure from the water that's getting disposed into it, and it just makes something crack and break. And boy, here comes that water to the surface. And it is almost impossible to stop once it gets up there, because it's under such pressure from being injected in that formation for so long.
Well, probably as impossible to stop it would be almost as impossible to get someone to take responsibility for that.
Right.
Any viewpoints on how do you make people accountable for those type of things, or responsible, or is that just something that is ultimately always going to go onto the state, and the state has to ante up the money for that?
Well, again, they've changed the plugging rules this last session. They're going to make more people plug a percentage of their wells ahead. I mean, that's a good first step. But again, you can't put the pressure on these old wells, these old formations, because, I would say a lot of the wells were not plugged knowing that this was going to be happening 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And they are coming back to life like a zombie, like you mentioned. And it really is something when these things happen. And again, it's an old plugged well, and nobody had that lease. The people that have it now didn't know that was out there. So it's a lot of pointing fingers at previous operators that probably don't exist today. And like you said, it goes to the state. The state has to go out and plug them. And those things are millions of dollars once they get started on them to try to plug.
And it does seem like another negative or reason why they don't get addressed is they're out in Pecos County or somewhere where no one really sees it. So they get a little publicity, but it's just out there. And it's not in Dallas County or Harris County. And so it just seems like the interest level is pretty reduced.
Well, and same thing with earthquakes, Grant. You've got, like you're talking about, out of Mentone, way out west. I mean, there's not there's one cattle per 4 sections of land out there. That's
Right.
how sparsely populated the land is. But they still have the earthquakes we're talking about. And we have these SRAs, these seismic areas that get studied and things like that. But there's no harm, no foul out there because there's no people out there. There's no homes. There's no houses. So again, it just gets to continue. But it's just something that hopefully the industry is going to solve ahead.
Okay. Well, so you brought up the point about the Manhattan Project, and I think that's a fantastic concept to think around. I'm fortunate that I have the power to make you Secretary of Energy. We're going to kick Chris Wright off, and we're making Kirk Edwards the Secretary of Energy. What's the next 3 or 4 steps? How do you make that happen? How
So
about
to
that
me,
for
again, we need to have a czar in Texas because the problem is in Texas. But what I would do, again, you've got the Permian Strategic Partnership. You got the best of the best oil companies in that PSP. I'm very proud of what they've done and what they've tackled in the past. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars in our communities for nursing and education and other things. But to me, that's a group, and PBPA and some others should all get together in a room and figure out how do we get this water to 3 or 4 common areas to desalinate it, to do things with. You've got university lands. That's 2 million acres of land here in West Texas that could easily store that water on the surface and make lakes out of it. But I think you started out this conversation is who owns it? What is the right salinity? What are the guardrails that you're talking about that this water has to perform to? And I think that's what everybody's afraid of, is that those parameters are still not solved, and there's just not a conviction to get this problem fixed yet, because everybody's living with it right now.
Because I think you're so smart, I'm going to keep pushing you and say, so how do you get that conviction? How do you get that started? Because I wouldn't say our Railroad Commission, and these are my words, not yours, but our governor, others are really pushing to make those things happen. And if they're not going to, why should the oil industry, oil companies, why should the mayor, they might want to, but they're not going to be able to have that. So what is that? The Manhattan Project, you had basically, public, private, you had 4 or 5 people that said, by God, we're going to do this. And they drove it. I don't see that in solving this environmental oil industry issue.
Yeah, and again, flaring could be in that same boat. We've got so much beautiful natural gas that we have to flare every day, and it's getting worse too. I mean, we were able to put enough in a pipeline, and we get another 2 BCF a day pipeline. But the problem is there's so much associated gas with the oil that is getting drilled that still has no place to go. But those are the 2 big black eyes right now we have in the industry. And again, what I would do, I would make the heads of these big independents that are out here, and they have the money to do it. I mean, they've got the resources, and it's just trying to get everybody on the same page to work together and come up with that solution. Because I do think that it's just like PSP. You could get the PSP of the water disposal.
Explain that to me. PSV.
Yeah, the Permian Strategic Partnership.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, you could get the those same companies that put together the answer for the water problems we have ahead. And I promise you, if they had that direction and drive and orders from their board and from their higher ups and their presidents, they would figure this thing out overnight. I really do. And they have the money to help do it. And I think the state would help them do it. I think the state would pass legislation and the EPA and everybody else, because we don't need to be cramming this into the shallow horizons and no telling what it's doing down there in those wells. We need to be addressing on the surface and getting it back into a condition where we can use it for something, especially these data center coolings or crops and cattle or something down the road.
Oh, I would think that if you could clean this water up, you could have the most agricultural heaven of West Texas all of a sudden, because you're going to have all this water to irrigate. It could turn it completely over.
Yeah, and Grant, they do. I mean, the technology's there. It's just how do you ramp it up on a scale of 1,000,000 to 1 right now on the pilots that they're doing already. The companies, so the water that they pump fresh water with the frac, but it comes out brackish because there's salt in the oil and
Sure.
things like that, and the produced water that comes back. But they're already treating that water to refrac with, so they're reworking the water. So the technology is there. It's just that next step of technology to take out, the benzenes and toluenes and the bad stuff that's still in that water, and to make it into something. But again, we have the technology to do it. There's no question we do. It's just how do we scale it up? How do we get all these companies, making them all do it together to answer that question?
So I'm going to give you about a month, and then I'll have you come back and you can give very specific answers on how that'll be done. It shouldn't take you long at all to figure out all the action steps that would be needed for that, right?
Well, again, it's a doable project. I just wish we would have the doables all get in one room together and say, this is our goal. We're going to do a Manhattan project and make this thing work.
Yeah, and I'm teasing you on that because it is complicated, but it's so. Last question. Everyone talked about drill, baby, drill. Are you glad we're drill, baby, drill? Has that been a success?
Yeah. Again, what did I start out saying? We lost 70 rigs in the past year, 7,000 jobs. I mean, it's a fallacy of that. And Lord knows how much production we'd be making if those 70 rigs were still running too.
But it's price related.
We're more in a wait stage right now, and we're going to wait out this pricing scenario. And it's kind of like Biden, dumping the SPR before midterms. I think midterms are going to be the big focal point ahead, which is sad because that means we have to experience another year of these lower prices. But in the meantime,
meaning you think that oil price will stay low so that the gas price at the gas station will stay low?
Well, put it a different way, the gasoline price staying low across the country is a tax break for all Americans, helps the economy, spurs it along. So I think that's going to be the key goal, is at least have that through the midterms next year. And then these world events, how are they going to come into play with Russia and Ukraine, especially Iran ahead? Venezuela, again, nothing's going to happen out of that country. Chevron can do very well if you're betting on a company. I'd take Chevron right now because I think they can probably get another couple 100,000 barrels a day on the market here within 6 months to a year in Venezuela, just from what they have. But again, I think Iran is really going to be the wild card ahead on the positive side of prices. But we sure have all those black swans you talked about. There's way many more of those than the white swan coming out of Iran.
There really are. Well, Kirk, really appreciate your time, and hopefully my audience has really enjoyed this. This is always I always find you very thoughtful, very informed. Again, I urge you all to go join Kirk Edwards' LinkedIn, because occasionally he needs to do it more often, but I'm sure it takes time and he has a day job. But he'll post a topic and a kind of a subject expert matter that I think you'll find very, very interesting and is always worth a read. So, Kirk, really appreciate your time. And if you like this show, if you like the presentation, please tell other people about Oilfield Strong and have them follow us. Thank you all.